Hello and welcome to today's broadcast on FinOps Careers, Roles, and Trainings brought to you by Insight and Microsoft. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be interactive. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical issues. I would now like to turn over this presentation to our speakers, Marcus and Jeff. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Abby. Appreciate the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this webinar and the next webinar in our ongoing FinOps and Microsoft series that we've been doing. So with me today, I have Jeff Amos, once again, from Microsoft Canada. And I am Marcus Benson. I'm our National Principal Architect for FinOps here at Insight. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about FinOps, really as a career and as a career path. We'll talk quickly about, how FinOps helps through cloud challenges, the anatomy of a FinOps team, some of the typical and common roles that we see within a FinOps team. The desired skills that companies are looking for when it comes to a FinOps practitioner, FinOps jobs, the current state of the job market, and then we'll talk just a little bit about training and education for FinOps practitioners. So, as organizations grow their cloud spend, as they continue to move additional workloads into the cloud, have new teams bringing more of their applications into the cloud. This creates a lot of complexity, and a lot of organizations, have a negative impact on their business through poor cloud financial management. Many organizations are overspending their cloud budgets. Typically, the level of waste across, a customer's cloud spend is usually around 30% waste. And most of these organizations are really worried about, ongoing cloud cost management and consumption. And the reason this is so difficult and so complex is you have, organizations with multiple departments, potentially multiple operating companies beneath them, with different teams and workload owners that, all have varying levels of maturity when it comes to understanding how to operate in the cloud and how to manage cloud resources. These teams are consuming, a huge number of services, applications that all generate costs. Every service offering, has a different cost model that you have to be aware of and understand to be able to optimize that spend. And, it gets even more complicated when you get into multi-cloud environments, and especially when you're doing things like shared services for those various teams.
And something you mentioned in there just subtly is that those levels of maturity, certainly as you think about the roles as they're attached to FinOps type of activities and capabilities, it kind of feels like we're being told to eat the whole elephant. It's a lot to figure out. There's a ton of data coming out of like the billing and usage APIs from different cloud providers. Certainly take this incrementally, even internally, as you're like formalizing not just your activities, but the organizations, those FinOps groups to support the activities. Always keep in mind that as the FinOps Foundation defines that crawl, walk, run type of mentality, start incrementally and showing value, and then also show the value of formalizing the team that focuses on these activities and the roles that we're going to discuss.
Yeah, and so Cloud FinOps is really the methodology that can help take some of that complexity out of it and allow your organization to make better data-driven decisions when it comes to managing cloud spend. Typically, FinOps is driven by a core central team. A lot of times it's part of a Cloud Center of Excellence team, could be part of a cloud governance group, could be part of finance. So depending on your organization, it could change on where that FinOps team lives inside of your organization. But the main charter and the main purpose of that FinOps team is to create, those collaboration channels between engineering, the business, executives, finance and procurement, and then all the way over to the cloud providers themselves. So that FinOps team is really helping to drive things like ongoing rate negotiations with your cloud providers. and working with the different engineering teams and operations teams on infrastructure changes, optimization, and continuous improvement in their environments. And they're driving this behavior through a multi-phased approach of FinOps, which is inform, optimize, and operate. So obviously you need to have visibility, understanding of your spend, understand the trends, to be able to identify, opportunities to optimize, to reduce costs, and to become more efficient in the cloud. And as you go, through these three phases, the operate phase is really all around providing continuous improvement and business value to the workload owners and teams through enablement, through training, through better reporting, through better processes, et cetera. So it really is, again, it's a three-phased approach, but these are cyclical, ongoing, and continuous phases that you'll go through.
Yeah. Oh, quick question, Marcus, and this came up from a lot of customer discussions I had at the recent FinOps conference down in San Diego. Is I was approached by everything from a CFO type of role, that executive type of role, all the way down to some of the internal practitioners that are actually writing scripts and codes and tools to collect billing and usage data and make sense of it. And one of the common questions as we step into some of the role structure and the specific roles that even the FinOps Foundation kind of evangelizes, and a common question is, where does this organization land? Is it a technical organization under the CTO? Do these roles reside under the CFO organization, or even how does that evolve over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. And I think that answer changes depending on your organization, your structure, and kind of, who's been leading that today. In a lot of cases, the FinOps capability and the FinOps functions, really are driven from the engineering side because they're the ones that are most intimate with the services they're managing, et cetera. And that FinOps team, again, is really that enablement arm that's providing the right visibility, the right best practices, the right processes to do this and manage this ongoing.
That's why I love presenting with you. You always have great answers.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, the FinOps practice structure, really has a lot of different roles and activities that it's driving. It could be writing scripts and automation, again, to bring in additional data sets, metrics around resources, et cetera. But the main roles that we typically see within, kind of the core FinOps team is there's typically a lead FinOps role. So this person is really, driving the overall business objectives, identifying the right measures, KPIs, and drivers and indicators for success. And then also the processes, structure of how the team is going to work and communicate and collaborate with the other parts of the business. Typically, there's a lead architect role within that FinOps team too, who's really helping to make sure FinOps is considered in architectural models. So things like financial governance, making sure the right tagging is in place, making sure that things are designed with cost in mind and optimization in mind. This architect typically is the one who's piloting, different FinOps tools, doing testing against new processes and new optimization opportunities, for example. There's usually a lead DevOps as well. Sometimes this is a part-time role. It's not necessarily always a full-time role, but this could be, a lead automation architect from the greater Cloud Center of Excellence, for example. That's a borrowed role that helps drive some of the ongoing development of KER queries and Azure cost billing data queries, optimization, automation, ensuring sustainability, efficiency over time. And then from an R&D perspective, it's good to have somebody on your team that can help, really drive innovation forward within your organization. So helping to do things like code reviews to modernize applications is a great example of where that lead R&D role can really focus to drive value for the organization. And then typically there's a program manager that's really working on the roadmaps, driving the agile approach to this. And this team is working with a bunch of other roles across the organization, like an executive sponsor, It's important to have executive sponsorship to really drive that behavior down throughout the organization. Obviously, chatting with IT, with heads of finance and purchasing, and sourcing, application owners to make sure they have the right visibility and understanding of how to manage their resources from an optimization standpoint. And then a finance controller to ensure the right, reporting, invoice reconciliation can happen on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. And I typically see that lead FinOps role almost immediately as they formalize that particular position, get overloaded. And so that's important to have an executive sponsor attached to these activities. So the resourcing is correct. You have enough manpower, you have enough budgetary allocation for the tool sets and development of the tool sets and the portals and the dashboards that are being published back into the business units, those consuming the resources. So certainly as you're formalizing that particular, especially the FinOps lead role, that it does have that sponsorship and the resources attached to it, so it's successful. And going back to the analogy of they're not viewing this as eating the whole elephant. They're resourced appropriately and they can execute correctly.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so, as you just mentioned, really the lead FinOps role is, in my opinion, the key role, the one that really needs to be in first, because this person is, again, really the lead collaborator, the one that's creating those lines of communication across the business and is driving the right objectives, measures, KPIs, reporting visibility, optimization efforts throughout the organization. Also working with, finance, management, development teams, other sponsors across the org.
And again, the word of caution around the lead FinOps role is don't get too bogged down in actually creating the reports. You know what you want to achieve. You want to create those KPIs. And yes, some of us are amazingly good at working with data and creating the visualizations on top of it, but it does consume a lot of time. And a lot of this role involves interaction with those development teams, the architecture teams, and as Marcus mentioned, the finance groups, including procurement. Don't let those conversations, those discussions and relationships amongst and across the organizations go unnurtured because we're so focused on generating the views. So there has to be a good balance there, especially in this particular role.
Yeah, the reporting obviously is an important piece, but you can't improve something if you can't measure it. So you really need to be able to put, KPIs and the right, measures in place so that you can understand, kind of your baseline and where you're at today and where you're trying to get to, and have some data and some context to back that up.
Yeah.
So some other core FinOps roles, again, we mentioned the architecture lead, and then lead DevOps and lead R&D. Again, the architecture lead, could be a part-time role, but as you grow, as your spend grows, typically we see FinOps team size growing with that spend. And I really think the architecture lead is really that next most important role to help drive the right technical requirements from a reporting standpoint, an optimization standpoint, and architectural standards across the organization.
And I love the fact that you included R&D in there, because a lot of times, especially from a data center operations standpoint, we're really good at provisioning things and just letting them run regardless of the price point. But that org that looks at the v.next type of versions, can we employ ChatGPT to improve like some component of an application? Or can we re-architect the application that consumes more PaaS meters, where you're getting those platform as a service meters like hosted transactional stores, or some of the embedded logic inside of data transformations that you get from those PaaS level meters? Can we employ those at a better price point, as well as increase efficiency of the applications? You always want to have a team looking into that and working closely with the lead FinOps type of roles. So they're doing it in a financially sound way, and they're showing the value over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that lead DevOps, lead R&D type role can really help to drive that innovation through, again, modernization activities and supporting and enabling the technical teams, the architecture teams with the right patterns, the right services, for their specific workloads, and help them through, some of those difficult pieces like code reviews and understanding, application dependencies, and helping them, to really create a plan to bring that into the cloud in a way that is, going to be most cost effective, but also, a modern and native approach. So I mentioned this, on the previous slide that, team growth in FinOps really comes with cloud spend and complexity. Still 62% of organizations today that are managing less than $1 million do not have a formal FinOps team or person in place. And by the way, that's annual spend. But as you grow, as you get to that 1 to 10 million range, typically the average team size we see is 2. As you get into that larger range of 10 to 100 million, 100 million to 500 million, 500 million plus, obviously that team needs to grow to help manage that and help, drive those behaviors across obviously a very complex environment if you're getting up to those levels of spend.
And this is also, I want to add to this slide that over time, I've seen FinOps teams become almost a self-funding activity. We're reducing or we're increasing the efficiency of spend. We're getting more vCPUs per dollar or memory footprint per dollar, or we're moving more transactions per dollar over time. That justifies the FinOps team's activities. So back to the KPIs that Mark has mentioned, having those measures of improvement over time helps justify the organization's existence as well as budgetary allocation. So that helps creating a long-term sustainable team is having those longer-term trending type of KPIs that are attached to some financial measure.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. So that team, as it grows, is going to be taking on more and more responsibilities and more activities that they'll be driving. Again, but collaborating with the other teams across the organization. So the app teams, the IT domain teams, finance, sourcing, and the various business teams that actually own the applications and workloads. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but obviously you can see by the breadth of activities here that there's really not one skill set that defines FinOps or can drive FinOps. It really requires a good understanding of not only finance and understanding data, but also understanding the technology behind it, the drivers of the spend, and also workload level efficiency, which is difficult. You really have to be ingrained again with those different app teams and workload teams to drive those kinds of activities.
Oh, quick question on this chart. A little bit of a pop quiz. So out of this list of activities, and I'll share my top one. But out of this list of activities, which one do you think is most challenging for the FinOps team as they're evolving in the early stages?
In early stages, it's probably. It's usually around guardrails and governance. That's usually the area I think that most organizations realize that they have gaps and need remediation in as they go down this path.
Cool. Yeah, and from my perspective, what I've seen is, and I think you're exactly right as well, is that tagging taxonomy and the compliance in around it is getting the base data set that's coming out of the billing systems clean enough, or at least clean enough to actually start making some sense around it and starting setting up some of the compliances in around architectural references and what's deployed. So I think between the two of us, those are probably, and it's great that they're top in the list, actually. Those are two of the initial challenging ones, because I've seen customers with tagging taxonomies out there, but they're historically broken in the first place. Their cost allocation and putting it in the right buckets, if you will, is ineffective upfront, and changes have to occur over time, which is always problematic because then you lose like some of the history of overall spend.
Yep. Yeah. And tagging consistency is a big challenge. Case sensitivity within tags create a lot of issues and inconsistency with tagging. Making sure that you have policy that can drive, consistent tagging is very important.
Cool.
All right. So we've talked a lot about the activities, but what are really the desired skills that businesses and enterprises are looking for when they're looking for FinOps practitioners or FinOps roles to fill some of those gaps within that team. And from a FinOps and cloud skills perspective, it's obviously FinOps experience at the number one and certifications around FinOps. But you also have to have a good technical understanding of the clouds that you're supporting. So Azure, AWS, and GCP certifications, CAF, so cloud architecture and well-architected frameworks, are incredibly important. Knowing the governance model that should be in place, the structures that you can put in place to increase visibility is incredibly important. So, having policy understanding and experience is another area that could be very useful for a FinOps practitioner. Automation and scripting is really, kind of a nice to have, I would say, when it comes to a FinOps role, because in a lot of cases, you can go to other areas of the business again and borrow maybe a lead architect from the Cloud Center of Excellence group to help you through some of those, automation needs and requirements.
And it does save a lot of time when you can automate like those repetitive tasks and do that quickly.
Yeah, but again, not a must-have, but a nice to have for a FinOps practitioner. And then skills around or experience around third-party cloud management platforms can also be very helpful too. If they've got experience in a third-party cloud management platform, they probably have a good understanding of the data set and how that information should be consumed. Data skills are obviously in high demand when it comes to FinOps teams, because a lot of what a FinOps team is doing is driving visibility through these, business intelligence platforms. And, these data sets, these billing data sets are very complex, very difficult to understand. So it does require, the ability to do some data architecture, some modeling to get, the right level of reporting. Skills around Power BI, Power Query, DAX can all be very important and handy skills for building out, additional data points that you need to look at.
Yeah, I think the data processing, being able to work with large data sets is one of the more critical ones. In my personal opinion, I don't think the FinOps Foundation focuses enough in that area. They do have a couple of working groups like the Focus Working Group that is trying to normalize the billing and usage data from multiple cloud providers so we can make more sense of it and work with it quicker. But as it stands today, having the capability, the skill set to work with large data sets is amazingly helpful. Because even if you create a report that is initially not super useful, at least you're getting an understanding of the data constructs that are coming out of the multiple cloud providers and mapping that into business or internal business units, and that will improve over time. But at least you will have the skill set to initially give it a go and get an understanding of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then other skills, that are really important for FinOps practitioners are, having a collaborative mindset. Again, a big part of FinOps is driving collaboration, driving those open communication channels between teams that, maybe didn't really talk to each other before. So much like DevOps, it's really around breaking down some of those barriers from a communication standpoint. So collaborative mindset and communication skills are going to come in very handy for any FinOps practitioner. Having a good understanding of agile methodology can also help, because most of these technology teams that you're going to be working with are going to be working within some kind of agile methodology. Organizational change management is another very important skill. Knowing how to manage change at an organizational level and drive the right behaviors, and also manage change resistance is going to be critical for any FinOps practitioner as well, because when you're working with engineering teams and workload teams that have a ton of competing priorities, you need to make this a priority for them. And how do you do that? Well, OCM offers, the right foundation to build, that collaboration channel and that ongoing support for those, different workload application teams and drive those behaviors ongoing. Analytical and critical thinking skills. FinOps is complex. Every service has a different pricing model, has different metrics that need to be considered when you're looking at things like optimization. So being able to understand how things are built, how teams are working with certain services, being able to understand solutions to complex problems is going to be a great skill.
And to be fair and transparent on that point, you kind of have to like puzzles in getting into a lot of this, because there will be a couple of things of, okay, I think we have the data. It's probably there. It's coming out of this particular API. And if I map it to this other data set, I can deliver a report that this business unit is looking for. So there would be a lot of situations that these particular roles get into that they don't know how to do it yet, but will. So those analytic and critical thinking skills of understanding a lot of the foundational pieces that you can build upon and create something new that is useful to internal groups, super critical. Because at several points throughout your activities, you're going to feel blocked, but the answer is always there. Because a lot of the FinOps activities is very data driven.
Yeah, and things change in the cloud so fast too.
Yeah.
There's always new services, new problems to solve. So really being able to, kind of roll with those changes and be able to drive, the right behaviors and right solutions to those problems is incredibly important.
Yeah, which also supports like long-term job stability for FinOps roles too. So that's
yeah. Influencing skills and coaching and enablement skills are also going to be very important, because again, you're working with a lot of different teams that have a lot of competing priorities. So how do you drive those right behaviors, and how do you drive the right continuous behaviors to those teams? So it's all around influence, coaching, enablement, and that really, kind of falls underneath that organizational change piece as well. So the FinOps job market right now is really getting hot. There's over 200 job postings currently on jobs.finops.org, and there's over 1,400 LinkedIn job postings containing FinOps in the United States alone. So there's a huge supply out there, or a huge demand out there for FinOps jobs, but there's a supply constraint. There's just not enough FinOps practitioners and experienced FinOps members that are out there today to fill these job roles. And so there's a bunch of different roles that we're starting to see, common titles that we're starting to see jobs or organizations looking for and looking to fill. Again, the most important that we see is typically that FinOps leader or that FinOps principal role, which is usually a pretty senior role. But again, there's also architect roles, FinOps engineering roles, FinOps analyst roles, so more of that kind of data analyst entry level type role, FinOps consultants like myself, and then also cloud FinOps managers that are more of that senior kind of mid-level role as well. So those are the most common titles that we're seeing, across these different job posts. But again, there's a huge demand for FinOps skills out there today. Companies need help here, and there's a big opportunity for folks to add this skill set, to their current skills and really be able to, have some job security in this space for quite a long time.
And one of the things that I don't think we mentioned, and I even get into this situation on a regular basis, is a lot of these skill sets are very transferable to multiple roles. While I personally love the FinOps role, I don't think I'd ever step out of this. Going into finance, for example, is not a far-fetched type of option, because you understand budgetary allocation and spend and monitoring and the KPIs attached to it. Because even in the discussions I engage with some of our customer CFOs about the transformation of CapEx to OpEx, or vice versa, because they're going from on-premise CapEx to cloud spend type of OpEx. How does that influence quarterly earnings reports and those type of activities? Which is an exciting next step for a lot of these FinOps practitioners and leads and architects, is to be influencing the overall corporate success, even up to a financial statement type of perspective. So keeping that in mind, as we have roles defined today, they will evolve even further as far as I've seen.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's going to be new functions, new activities within FinOps that are going to start to bubble up. Things like even sustainability, for example.
Yeah.
We've been seeing a trend there around FinOps and GreenOps and sustainability really being kind of parallel work streams that can all support each other. So the important thing is, there are a ton of training resources out there today. So if you have, a baseline of cloud knowledge and cloud skills, and you want to add FinOps, as one of your skill sets, the FinOps Foundation website is a great place to start, just to understand high level around, what the framework is, the different FinOps domains, capabilities, the maturity model, different personas, and the 3 phases of FinOps. There's also a book. They just released the 2nd edition a couple of months ago, which is a great, really it's kind of the operating manual for the FinOps Foundation and for the FinOps methodology. Really provides a complete education around FinOps and the different activities, roles, structure, et cetera. So, if you're really kind of that self-learner, self-paced learner, the FinOps book is a really great way to familiarize yourself with the concepts and to prepare yourself for the certification exams. There's also a YouTube channel with recordings from all of the FinOps monthly member summits, training videos on different topics, recordings from industry events like FinOps X. And then there's also, again, the certification page. So within the certification track, there are self-paced courses, there are instructor-led courses, and there's also a standalone exam. So again, if you're kind of that self-paced learner and you'd rather just buy the book and kind of learn on your own, you can definitely do that and then just take the exam standalone from any of the courses. Beyond the FinOps Foundation training and certifications, there are also cloud provider specific trainings available for each of the major public cloud providers. So Microsoft has its own cost management track within Microsoft Learn. AWS has its own cloud financial management track and resources within their documentation page, as does Google. So all of the public cloud providers know that this is a very important area for most organizations, and they are providing some, provider-specific training, that really relates directly to the services and capabilities within those cloud providers themselves.
And for each cloud provider, the content that I'm seeing, not just from us on the Azure side, but also AWS and GCP, within their cloud financial management, as well as their cost management content, shows you the additional depth of, well, if I do want to automate, these are like the APIs, the data feeds, the authentication method to the data that I want to employ as I kind of mature my process. It's a great connection. However, from my personal perspective, I would start with the FinOps Foundation training for that base framework and understanding the way I want to categorize my thinking into capability areas and the maturity levels attached to them, and then go to the vendor websites, the cloud sites, and look for that next level of content. Okay, I want to automate by billing and usage data collection. What do I go to? So each cloud provider is doing actually a fairly fantastic job at publishing that content. This is what you want to think about with the pre-existing tool sets that are available even from the portals, some templates that you could use, and the various data visualization tools, Power BI, Tableau, and such. And then the next level down of, I want the raw data sets. This is the APIs and examples to employ. So certainly look for that level of depth through this content.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the FinOps Foundation training is really a cloud agnostic approach. So it's a little more high level, but it gives you a good baseline of knowledge of the concepts, of the activities, the functionality of a FinOps group and a FinOps practice. But as you get deeper into FinOps, you're going to need some good knowledge around your specific cloud providers. So that's really where you can go that one layer deeper, as Jeff was saying, and start to get some of that service specific knowledge within the cloud providers themselves. So I mentioned, the certification track. There are multiple certifications now for FinOps. There's a FinOps Certified Practitioner exam, which is kind of the standard certification that we see. And there's also now a FinOps Certified Professional, which really goes one level deeper, goes in a lot more depth around, those domains and capabilities of FinOps practice and a FinOps practitioner. And then there's also persona-based training for some of the stakeholders that are working with the FinOps teams. So engineers, finance folks, executives, procurement, and product owners can go to learn.finops.org, and they can actually take a course that's specific to their role. All right. Well, that wraps up the content for today. So again, FinOps is really becoming a blossoming career path for a lot of individuals that have, finance backgrounds, data backgrounds, cloud backgrounds. So it's definitely something to, if you fit in any one of those buckets, something to add to your skill set and to your tool belt, because again, there's a huge demand for FinOps experience, for FinOps support, for FinOps capabilities, but there's not a lot of experience and not a lot of practitioners out there within that job pool. So definitely a great opportunity to, increase your job security, potentially, continue to develop your career, and potentially to jump, another step up in your career, potentially within, one of these FinOps practices and teams.
And to be fair, for me, it's a lot of fun, especially if you like puzzles and working with data and understanding data center architectures and pre-existing data centers and some cloud technologies, evolving that in with that finance type of view, the cash flow and budgetary monitoring type of view. For me, it's a fantastic new puzzle. So it's very entertaining, and as well as, but you have to like puzzles in general, as well as being exposed to some of the newest technologies and working with the data sets. So it's a very exciting space. I highly recommend it, especially for pre-existing data center architects or a finance type of role. If you're in that role today and you're interested or have excitement in and around application architectures and cloud targets, fantastic roles to step into.
Yep. Yeah, and if you're a FinOps practitioner today and you need some help, and some experience to draw on for your FinOps practice, please do reach out to us. We'd love to have a conversation and see how we can help accelerate your FinOps journey in the cloud.
Hey, Marcus, always a pleasure presenting with you. And I think in this particular presentation, you did most of the heavy lifting. So thank you in creating a lot of the content there. It's always fun to do recordings and live webinars with you.
Likewise, Jeff, thanks again for joining, and appreciate all your support.
Absolutely my pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everyone.